With all the success you've had, do you still face, are you currently facing any fears, or are there fears about the horizon?
I have to give you amazing props. You're such a curious person about the people that you talk to. I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
The answer is, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Hello, Jeff. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate you making the time.
My honor, my friend. I am so glad that you asked me to join you today.
And for everyone watching, Jeff is a sales veteran with decades of experience managing up to millions of dollars, award-winning author, speaker, and a bunch of other stuff we're getting into. And we're going to be talking about selling your next big idea. And I'd love to start out with your story. How did you get to the point? You're writing about sales, you're speaking about it. What's your story? How did you get so good at it? Where did it start?
Well, that's such a great question. I actually went to college just so I could be a very well-prepared salesperson and author. And I got a degree, an undergraduate degree in music education and a master's degree in music composition. Makes no sense, but it seems to have worked. But I actually ended up in sales by default. I look back and say divine providence, but when I finished my degrees, my wife needed to finish her degree back in the state of Alabama. And so I needed to get a job while she finished up. And there were no teaching jobs close enough. So I ended up taking a job in sales. And as the rest happened, I was just making so much more money than I would make teaching. I stayed in that arena. But I had a 30 plus year career in sales and sales leadership. One company, I was one of the tops in the nation. The other company, the last 20 years, I was actually in the active sales side of things, was with a Fortune 500 insurance company, and I'd worked my way up. I was a state sales manager for them. And so I had a lot of credibility in sales and leadership. But I decided at 54 years old, it was time to retire from that industry. And that's when I began to write and pursue speaking. And our mutual good friend, Bob Berg, I had met him over the course of my career in the insurance industry, and he and I have become friends. And so when I was making that transition, he was the first person I reached out to. I sent him the first draft of my book, and I said, "Tell me what you think." Of course, he is the most amazing, encouraging person, and his comments back were great. He kind of took me under his wing a little bit to give me some suggestions about how to make this transition. And so I wrote the first book. It was just mine. I tend to function in the business parable side of things because I like writing fiction. Now, I can write how-to books too, but I'd much rather write a great story that when I put it in somebody's hand, they can't put the book down, and then they learn some things. So the first one was a sales parable. The second one actually did a couple of years ago with a lady named Lisa Wilbur. It was called "The Lady with the Blue Hair." She's Avon's fifth highest producer in history. It's amazing. But she is the first person that I reached out to when we were doing a co-authorship. And it worked very well. She is a joy to work with. And then right after that book came out, Bob and I, of course, we communicate all the time. Bob has this thing called the Go Giver Success Alliance. I was a member of that. So was Lisa. That's how we met. But Bob sent me an email, fourth quarter last 22, I guess it was. And he said, it was asking a sales question because he and I will both pick each other's brains about that. But the very last sentence he put in there, Mark, was, "By the way, save this because when you and I do our parable, this could be some good material." Mark, we hadn't discussed the first word about doing a parable at that point, but being the shy person that I am, I answered his question. I said, "Oh, and by the way, if you're serious, oh yes, we're doing that."
Yeah. So with sales, we're going to talk about a lot of things with selling your next big idea, fusion points, becoming objection proof. As far as sales goes, from your experience, where does the sales process actually start? There's so many different answers and so many different ideas about that. In your world, when does the sales process start?
For me, the sales process starts way before the prospect has ever met me. It's in where my focus is, and I'll encourage everybody who follows you, whether they're in just if they're a business owner or if they're in sales, the whole process of sales should start with your focus on the other person. And I like to say, and Bob says this too, is when you get down to it, sales at its core, at its very best, is being able to focus on someone else's needs, have enough empathy so that you can understand where they're coming from, help them discover what their needs, wants, and desires are, and then you help them get it. And so that's kind of the focus. And then I start off by teaching people this too when I'm in seminars is you want to create 3 positive emotional touches with a prospect before you ever ask them for that first meeting. And the reason for that, if we have time and you want to come back to it, is
Yeah.
because you're looking to create the fusion points. And I don't care what your business is, everybody, once you understand the concept of fusion points, and it's built around the science of how people make decisions, you can influence some decisions that are very helpful for your business. And so that's where we go with that.
Talk a little bit more about empathy and being focused on the other person. It's so easy to get caught up in the pitch, the elevator pitch, the sales pitch, whatever it might be, where you're talking a lot of, I won't say you, a lot of people are talking about themselves. Explain empathy and how you develop that.
That's such a great question. Empathy, to me, is putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. And I guess if you look at the technical definition of it, it's trying to understand how someone else really feels. And although I'm not sure you can always do that, some have a very high level of empathy. I happen to be one of those that do. My first outside sales job, the sales manager almost didn't hire me, Mark, because I didn't have the experience he was looking for. But they had these standardized tests they would use, and my empathy score was off the chart. That's his words, not mine. So he gave me the chance. But it's either understanding what someone else is feeling, or at least knowing that they're feeling something, and then giving importance to the fact of what they're feeling matters both to them and for you too. And so it's kind of doing it in that way.
So what does that conversation look like? What kind of questions do you ask? How do you get other people to talk about themselves?
Sure. Of course, there's standard things that would apply in any relationship, not even necessarily a business one. But asking some key questions. Tell me about your family. Where are you from? Uh, how long have you been in the area? What do you do for a living? Asking questions like that, but always doing it in such a way that it can't be a yes or no answer. Just get them talking, and then use your ears and your mouth in the same proportion that you have them on your head. You got 2 ears, 1 mouth. Talk a little, listen more, and just stay focused on that. So.
Taking a step back from that, let me rephrase that. What should initial outreach look like? It's not just pitching, you get the automatic messages now on LinkedIn where it's obviously a bot and it's just bam, buy from me. It's like, I haven't even met you. Wait a second. Whether it's LinkedIn or networking events, how do you approach someone to set up a sales conversation without turning them off right away?
Well, the easiest way to do that, and it goes back again to the Fusion Points branding that I use, is to work with the science, with the neurology of the brain, how people naturally want to react anyway, and work with that science instead of in opposition to it. All decisions that we humans make, regardless of what we're facing at the time, they're pretty much neurologically speaking, they'll happen in the same way. The part of our brain that controls emotion or generates emotion is going to communicate with the part of our brain that processes logic. The two of those things together will produce a decision. Now, in the case of prospecting, when you're looking at cold contacts like that, they're going to get one of 3 responses. You're going to get one group of people that they already know they have a need in this area. They may even know your brand a little bit or your company. So when you reach out, it's going to create a little bit of that. It's going to put a positive emotion with that logic, and they're going to move a little bit forward. But you got 2 other groups that it doesn't work. They don't have that. You got one group that would consider an unexpected contact by a salesperson, whether it's by email or face to face, is a little bit of an interruption to their day, and it will create a negative emotional response. So what happens in your brain is when the positive emotion combines with logic, then it shoots a somatic marker down into our chest. It gives us a feeling that we like, and we want to move forward with it. But when it's a negative emotion in our brain that's combining with logic, at that point, the somatic marker is something that we don't like. We push back. We don't want to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
I call that combination of negative emotion and logic a collision point. And the natural thing that any prospect or any business or even any personal relationship is going to do at that point is say no and back up. But when you do the fusion point of combining the positive emotional experience with the logic of what's going on, then it's more comfortable for people to say yes. So what I teach in a prospecting system is to create 3 positive emotional touches before you ever ask for the first appointment. Because what happens is when you get to that second group that considers an unexpected sales call an interruption and they have a negative emotional response, they
Mm-hmm.
combine that with the logic of what you're doing, and they're not going to either going to ignore you or they're going to push back. And then there's a third group that they don't really have an emotional context. They just have no reason to think about you yet. So your contact is just goes in the wastebasket, basically, even if it's on their computer. But if you intentionally create 3 positive emotional touches before you ever even ask for that first contact, then you still get those in that first group that would have responded anyway, but you're going to start seeing an increase in your responses from the second and third group, and it makes it well worth the time to do it. And what I teach people is on those contacts, make them personal. Don't if it was an email marketing thing, I would be coaching someone. Don't send out a blind email trying to do prospecting. Reach out first off, do a little research on the prospect, and send them something that would mean something to them. Like if you notice that they've got a positive review online or they've got some sort of positive press, take a minute, and I'm going to surprise you here because this is going to seem very old-fashioned, but take a minute, print that thing off, put a handwritten note on it, say, hey, I saw this, I was impressed, and then add 2 sentences. I hope to meet you soon. Please expect my call, but then drop it in the mail to them or get it to them. Maybe on the second touch, you go ahead and do an email of maybe an article or something that you think they would find particularly valuable for their business. If it relates back to something you do, great, but make it more about them. And then with that second contact, again, do some sort of thing, I look forward to meeting you. There's a great service out there. I'm not personally involved with it. I've just seen it. It's called Send Out Cards. And you can literally go online and you can pull up an image off their website or off their social media profile, pop that image on the card, put your note in there, send out cards, mail it. They'll have it in their hands. But if you'll do 3 things like that first, each with some sort of little context about what you're sending, and then saying, I hope to meet you soon, please expect my call. Then when you finally do reach out for that contact, that call, your percentage of people who say yes goes up because you've made 3 positive emotional creations in their head and you combined it with the logic of what you want to do, and your numbers go up.
So let's look at that's awesome for online when you can do the research on LinkedIn, their website, and other online sources. What about virtual or in person when you're at a networking event and you want to have that first touch point to lead to the next 2? What do you do when you don't have time to research someone and you just meet them in a networking situation?
Oh, such a great question. Here's the key to that. And when you're meeting someone in a networking situation, don't be so concerned about taking a bunch of your own business cards and getting them in people's hands. Instead, be the connector. As you're talking with people at a networking function, one of the strongest bonds you'll build with anybody there is when you start asking them about what they do. And then as you're meeting other people that night, connect people together that could be good potential business partners for each other. Like if I met you one night and you were telling me what you did, and then later I met someone who's in an industry that it would fit very well with what you're doing, I can connect. What I do is I would bring you over to them and say, hey, you guys need to meet. And I would introduce you and then back up. I've done that even with emails with people. One of the things that I like to do, and it won't be a surprise now that I'm telling you, but every time someone has me on their show as my way of saying thank you and also trying to help their business grow, I connect them with other people that might be good guests for them, or I do that. It's just something I do. So the step 1 is at the event itself, be the connector, be the one that is helping everybody meet, especially when you see that it's a good match as far as their business goes. Then the second thing, send a handwritten note to everybody you meet. Get their card so you can do that, but send a handwritten note. I love to use the same note card that Bob Berg uses when he teaches endless referrals, which was a book that changed my world.
Yeah.
But send them a little handwritten notes. Hey, I just want to thank you. It was so much fun meeting you the other night. I hope we get to see each other again soon. And you do that. And then I would probably the third touch in that case, Mark, was I would, in the process of getting to know them, I'd take little notes about, what would be good. And then I'll find something good for that third touch, or maybe I would use a send out card. And at that point, then I would reach out to them about setting up a meeting to see if there's some way you guys could do business together.
How do you do that? What is that? What does the message or the verbiage look like? Because I know that's one thing. I mean, I've dealt with it, and a lot of people I've spoken with have dealt with it, where they're, first of all, they're probably not going to do what you just did, which creates amazing rapport. Even if they do it, it can get, I'll say, awkward. Okay, it's about you, and I saw this, and here was a press release about you. You do send out cards, whatever you might do. You connect them at a networking event or via email. How do you shift that focus to, it has to at some point, I'm imagining, come down to a sales call of some sort. How do you shift the focus without being too awkward and like, oh, by the way, I want to talk about me now? What do you do?
Well, it won't be awkward at all if on each of your contacts you're still saying, "Hey, the ones you haven't met, you're saying something about want to meet you someday." But even if it's someone you've met at an event, you still keep doing that. But your contact when you're ready to move forward is say, "Hey, do you have a few minutes maybe this next week? There's a couple of ideas that I've gotten, and I'd like to reach out to you to see if it would be something that would be helpful for you." Again, you're thinking about what's in it for them when you do that, and in your verbiage. One thing we all have in our business context is we know that if if a prospect chooses to become our client, there's some way that their world is going to improve, whether it's professionally or business or personally. There's some way that their world's going to improve by taking advantage of what we're bringing to the table. And so as you're doing that verbiage and reaching out to them, reach out to them about what I refer to as their value proposition. Because you see, a value proposition is one of those terms that gets thrown around really loosely, and even well-intentioned companies, I think, kind of miss the mark. Because your value proposition, it has nothing to do with your product, how great it is, or your service. It has nothing to do with how great your company is and how they go above and beyond every time. And it doesn't really even have anything to do with how great the salesperson is. It has everything to do with how their life changes and how it gets better if they take the step you're asking them to take. And so I refer to a value proposition as really their value from our proposition. And that's how to think of it. So as you're reaching out to that prospect, think in terms of your industry, how it all fits together, and then come up with a couple of key phrases. Doesn't have to be anything long that points them toward their value from your proposition. And when you ask for that means, I'd like to see if this would work for you. You're not asking them to meet with you as a salesperson. You're asking them, hey, this would probably be something worthwhile on your end that help you do this or this. I'd like to visit with you to see if it would work in your situation. And that's one of the easiest ways.
Is part of that based on, are you getting some of this information? You meet at a networking event or you reach out, you have the initial points of contact to create a value proposition that's their value. Is some of that based on researching them online, or is it based on the conversation, or both?
It would be both, probably. Everything's, there's a lot of variables in the mix, but you're going to get a lot of information, I would assume, while you're networking. Because if you're asking them about their business and what they do, heck, you can even ask them, what's the value to your client to do that? And by the way, one of the very best questions you'll ever ask at a networking event, especially a face-to-face networking event, but it would also work for an online networking event, is say, hey, Mark, I meet a lot of people out there in what I do, and I've got a lot of contacts. If you don't mind, take a second and tell me, what do I need to be looking for out there to know if it will be a good prospect for me to send your way? And they'll tell you all of the key things that would make someone their ideal client avatar. And then as that helps you even with how you're going to make your touches, it helps you with how you approach how you might provide value to them. But the key is you're always focused on that other person, and it's not some philanthropic thing, although it's a great way to do your life. It's not some Pollyanna kind of thing. It literally is a great business model too, because the old saying that people want to do business with and refer business to other people that they know, like, and trust. This is how you do that, how you create that, because you're focused on providing value to them.
When you provide value for them, I'd love to come back to what you spoke about a little bit earlier with neurology. That was so interesting. What's going on in their brain? What are you helping to make happen in their head that makes everything a much more viable conversation for you in the long run?
Well, if anyone really wants to research the science behind this, look for the works of Dr. Antonio Damasio. He's a professor of neuroscience at the USC and an adjunct professor at the Salk Institute, and is kind of considered the expert when it comes to the neurology of the brain, especially with how decisions get made. And without boring your audience to death, basically, there's a science, an actual neurological process that occurs in the brain with every decision we make. And then once we learn that science and we work with it, we can influence how some very key decisions get made. We can influence how a prospect who we've never met will give us that first meeting when their default setting is to tell salespeople no or ignore them completely. We can influence how they'll make that decision to become our client and our customer, or our walking ambassador. If we're building an organization, we can even use that same science to influence how someone would make the decision to come on board, and more importantly, make the decision to persist. But here's what happens specifically. There's a part of your brain that creates emotion. And there's a part of your brain that connects that processes logic. That's where the decisions come from. When that negative, or when that emotional response happens, it will always send an electrical charge down into your torso. It's called a somatic marker. And that somatic marker is going to do a couple of different things based on what's going on. If it's that negative emotional response, well, you don't like the way we start to feel. We might get anxious, short of breath. We feel uncomfortable. So whatever logical thing we're facing at the time, making a decision, combining with that emotion, that's the collision point, and that pushes back. It is very hard to make anything happen positively when that's occurring. But the opposite is true as well, where when it's that positive emotional or that positive emotion that's created in the brain, it still sends that somatic marker down into our chest as well. But what happens is we love the feeling. We want to continue that. That's how relationships start. It's how so many great things happen. So when that emotion is connecting with logic to produce the decision is, I'm comfortable moving forward. I like this. I want to keep this going. And so I even teach it not just in prospecting, but literally in every part of a sales model, in every part of an organizational model where an organization's trying to reduce their turnover in their team. I teach it in every possible step, because the truth is, it's the way our bodies work. And if we learn to work with that, and I'm not talking about it in a manipulative way in any stretch or form. I'm talking about creating mutually beneficial situations where you're helping that prospect solve an issue. If it's in sales, if it's not in sales, it's your organization. And then you are helping your team by helping them create the world they want outside of work, helping them have a great life. And when you do that, it just creates such a bond with you that they'd be hard pressed to ever move and go work for someone else.
So in the sales world, when you do everything right and you get them, you have that conversation, hey, I have something, and you give them their value proposition and phrase it that way that they see the value in it. What does the actual sales conversation look like at that point? When they've agreed to talk to you, then what?
Great question. Pretty much every sales conversation is going to come down to about 5 key parts. You got a rapport section where you're trying to establish a relationship pretty quickly. You've got a discovery section where you're asking the right questions to uncover the client's prospects' needs. You've got a recommendation phase where you're basically laying out your solutions. You've got a credibility phase where you're establishing why your company and why you can do the job well. And then, of course, you close the sale. In the best way to create those fusion points in the actual sales conversation, you should be trying to do it everywhere. But the best way to me is in the discovery section when you're asking the right questions. Because see, there's a phenomenon that happens out there, and sometimes salespeople won't admit it, don't like to admit it. And most of the salespeople I know and they wouldn't be this way.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate truth is, when words are coming out of a salesperson's mouth, prospects don't automatically assume they're true. It's just a fact of life.
What? I'm in shock.
It's shocking, I know. Thank goodness for politicians, because when they're speaking, everybody knows what's happening. It makes salespeople look good. All right. So,
Oh.
in the discovery section, what I teach people is a concept of asking and developing the right questions so that the prospect will say what the prospect needs to hear. And I know that's a little bit of a twist there, but think about this. If you, unless they already know you, like you, and trust you, or you were introduced to them by a common friend that they already know, like, and trust, you're kind of starting off in the hole. So if you were to tell them all the wonderful reasons that they should be doing business with you and what it's going to do for them and all that, that's all well and good, but it's still coming out of your mouth. Therefore, it's suspect.
Yep.
But if you develop the right questions, you can literally ask the questions in such a way that they'll tell you all the great, wonderful reasons they should be doing business with you. And the most important thing is, instead of it coming out of your mouth, it came out of theirs. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I was in the employee benefits industry for 20 years. And in that industry, I could have easily gone in and said, hey, you need to offer a disability policy to your employees so that it takes care of them when they're missing work and they're hurt. It'll help your employee satisfaction, blah. I could have gone through all that, and it was all true. But if I were to ask a question to the business owner, it's something like, are there benefits in the past that you thought about offering, but for whatever reason you didn't do so? And they'd say yes, almost in every case. And it was usually dental or disability. Don't know why. And then I would say, do you mind sharing with me why you thought it was a good idea and why it didn't work out? Well, they'll sit there and tell you every reason that offering the policy was a good idea. And you just, you take notes and all that, and you don't get too excited. Don't tip your hands. This is not a card game. All right. But you take notes and you listen, and they'll tell you that. Another question I used to ask in that arena, Mark, was I would say, with so many employers facing the very difficult budget choice that they either had to cut benefits somewhat or cut them out completely, you still have a benefit plan in place. I want to commend you for that. Do you mind sharing with me why you think it's important enough to still go to the effort? They'll tell me, well, it helps me attract a good employee. They would tell me everything I would have told them anyway, but it didn't come out of my mouth. It came out of theirs. So then when I've finished with that, it's very easy for me to look and say, Mark, you said a couple of things there that are pretty important. You said you wanted to do this before, but you couldn't because of this reason. Or you said the reason you have a benefit plan in place is because you want to do this, this, and this, and this. And I said, Mark, I got some good news for you. I think some of our programs will actually help you do that, and you don't have to spend any money directly with us to make that happen. And all of a sudden, then when I would make my recommendations, then they were going, okay, I get this. And it's funny. And then the last thing I would do, it's just so funny. This is so backwards from traditional sales training, but it's the truth. When I would get to the point where I'd presented my solutions, then I would talk about the company. And when you're doing your credibility phase, it's always great to have some sort of testimonials you could show the client, either if it's e-based on your website, but something where it's somebody else saying that you do what you say you're going to do, basically. But then when it would get to the close, there's another phenomenon that happens in sales. People like telling salespeople no. They just do. I can't explain it. It just happens. So my favorite way to close a sale or to open a new relationship was always to get them to say no. I'd finish what I was going to do, and I'd say, well, look, do you see any reason we shouldn't move forward with this? Well, no. They win by saying no. I win because we got a new client. So
oh, that's like some Jedi stuff there. Whoa. These are not the droids you're looking for. They're not the droids we're looking for. Move on.
Well, back when I was still in the insurance industry, one of my top new employer group openers, the guy was 67 years old when we recruited him. And he very good student. He was good anyway to start with, but a very good student. And he would laugh. And he said, he said, I almost never have to close. When I say, you see any reason that you wouldn't want to move forward? They said, no, I'll just go ahead and start setting things up. It's like I don't even really have to ask a closing question anymore. And that's the value. If you've done a great job of creating fusion points and how you prospected and how
Mhm.
you made them comfortable, heck, even if you get objections, you can handle the objection in such a way then rather than it being obstruction to your future, it becomes a bond with your prospect. So there's a lot of things you can do as long as you're focused on creating the fusion points.
So when you're creating the fusion points, and you might have already touched on it, but just to be clear,
Mhm.
in the sales conversation, like you just mentioned, you're going to run into some objections. Is what you just said everything about being objection proof, or are there other clarification points? I mean, how that's so powerful. Just saying I'm objection proof is so powerful. How do you get to be that way?
Oh boy, such a great question. And part of becoming objection proof is kind of how you've led everything up until to the point where you're having that sales conversation and then inside that sales conversation. A couple of precursors I'll throw out, and then I'll actually give you the steps that Bob and I teach in Streetwise to Saleswise about becoming objection proof. But the precursors are the better your discovery is, the fewer the objections you'll ever get. Because if you've asked the right questions and they've told you, like what I was talking about earlier, all the things that they're trying to accomplish, they're not going to object too much to that because that was their words. They've already told you that's what they want. So that's number one. Number two is handle your common objections during the actual sales conversation. Once anybody's been in sales with any company, probably for a couple of weeks or a month, you've kind of heard what the common objections are going to be in your business model. Well, learn to handle those or talk about those in the actual sales conversation. Because if you bring up what could be an objection along with its solution, then it's education. But if you don't do that and the client expresses it later, then it's an objection and you got to work with it a little bit differently. And then the third precursor I'll say before I get to the steps is this: never, ever try to overcome an objection. That seems all kinds of wrong, and I know that.
Say that
But
again.
exactly. When most traditional sales training really spends a lot of time on teaching you how to overcome objections. They said this, you say that, they say this, you say that. The problem with that is twofold. Number one, lots of times they don't even know why they're really objecting. Objecting is just not something they're comfortable going forward with. So they may say something that's really not the objection. But the other side of it is nobody wants to be overcome by anything other than maybe joy or happiness or love or something like that. But the truth is, when you try to overcome something, it puts people on the defensive. An objection, for lack of a better term, is pretty much like someone's opinion. And you need to look no further than our current political climate to know just how much people love it when you want to overcome their opinion. They push back, it creates a collision point.
Yeah.
But instead, work side by side with them through the process I'll throw out here in a second, but side by side with that prospect, find a solution that works for them and do it together with them, and you'll create the bond. So here are the quick steps. Step one in becoming objection proof, after those precursors, of course, is empathize. When they say something, give it importance. Don't argue with it. Don't debate it. Listen to it and give their opinion some importance. Say, I've even gone so far as say, I can understand how that's something you'd want to think about, and you give credibility to them, and that it surprises them that as a salesperson, you're not just trying to debate them and get them to change their mind. Second thing is to dig a little deeper. Ask questions. I always ask permission first, but then say, do you mind expanding on that a little bit? I want to make sure that I really understand that from your perspective. Get them to talk more about it because you will get information you don't already have. And like I said, sometimes you'll find out that the objection they said is not even the real objection. It'll bring out what's really going on below. Third is to isolate the objection. And that's basically saying, other than what we're talking about here, if I'm able to find a solution for that, would there be anything else that would keep you from moving forward? Make sure that that's the objection. And then the fourth thing is to reframe their perspective. And basically, when they've given you something that's a concern of theirs and you've empathized with it, you ask questions so they see you really are trying to understand it. And then the isolation is just something to help you from getting too much in the mix.
Mhm.
But at this point, they'll mentally relax and give you permission, because you're side by side with them mentally at this point, of changing their perspective. Our frame is what we see everything through. Everything that's happened to us in our life brings us to the point where when we're seeing something now, we're interpreting it through all those filters. Well, at this point, they'll mentally give you permission to reframe their perspective. And so you say, well, I may not have the best solution for you, the perfect solution here, but you mind if we brainstorm a little bit? I've got a couple of ideas and see if you think they'll work for you. And then you shift the perspective to what you want to help them solve it with. And then, of course, the last step is to close the sale.
Yeah. So after you hit that last step and you close a sale, another conversation entirely would be a whole thing about referrals. But after you close a sale, I know I've been in this situation where the person disappears. They deliver a service and poof, they're gone. What do you do to maintain a relationship after you close the sale?
Constantly, based on what you think the client would like best, constantly be in contact. Emails are good. By the way, video emails are much better than just their handwritten emails. You and I have a mutual friend that sends us some video emails like that. And so that's one way to do it. But staying constantly in contact and being referable, doing the job you said you were going to do, but then having a process that you know how to use. But if you're doing the job well, which is just kind of your entry ticket, and then above that, you're constantly looking for ways that you can stay in touch and provide value. And one of the best ways, by the way, to provide that value with your existing customers is to do what we were talking about in the networking event a while ago. You tell your customer, look, I meet a lot of people out there. Would you mind sharing with me what I need to be looking for to know if someone I'm in touch with would be a good referral for me to send your way, and let your client talk to you about that? And you take notes and you honestly try to connect them with people. Those things create so many fusion points that after that point, especially, you will find them so willing to introduce you to people. It is crazy. Two best authorities on referrals or introductions. Of course, my co-author on Streetwise, Bob Berg, his first book, Endless Referrals, was about networking and creating those introductions, and it's just awesome. But the second guy is a guy named Bill Cates. His branding is the original referral coach. And I love he when he's talking with clients, he talks about introductions. Some people aren't comfortable with the word referral, but if he's got a structured way that he teaches people how to help them with introductions. And if you've done what I've taught you on this, and including doing some introductions for people, the first time I did that, by the way, Mark, I literally was sitting in front of one of the owners of one of my accounts, and I thanked him for his business and all that. But then I said, as I'm meeting all these people, I'd like to know, how do I know if someone will be a good person for me to send your way, be a good prospect for you? And he told me. The first thing he did, though, was he thanked me. He said, I've been in business for 30 years. Every salesperson asks me for referrals. You're the first one to ask me how you could refer business to me. Thank you. And so he told me what to look for. I had my cell phone there. I picked it up. I made a call to two people, and I did it this way because I didn't want to put them on the spot. I made the call to two people, and I said, hey, Mark, Jeff West here. Quick question. I've got a friend. He does in this business. I think might be a good thing for the two of you to get to know each other a little bit. And I said, in front of my client, I said, I've worked with a guy for a while. I know him, I like him, and I trust him, and I think you can too. Would it be all right if I give him your contact information? Every time they'll say yes. I've never had one say no yet, but
Wow.
it's okay, thank you. And then I hung up. I did two things that way. Number one, I made both of my contacts feel very comfortable. So when I gave him the information, the connection was an easy connection for both of them. But the second thing I did is I modeled the behavior I was hoping to eventually have happen from him, which did. So
That's awesome. And perfect way to close out here. We've covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. When it comes to selling a big idea and sales in general, if someone's listening, you covered a lot. I love what you said. If you were to say, you know what, if nothing else, do this one thing. Get started here. Do this one thing above all. What would you say is the most important thing and best advice you'd give people to do?
Oh, here's what I will say. I'm trying to think of how to say this appropriately for any audience here. There's something I used to say all the time. Now I'm a person of faith, and that's be a person of faith kind of thing. But my thing I would always say was, work like it's all up to you, pray like it's all up to God, and then get out there and go to work, because even God can't steer a parked car. so, so start the activity and be focused on the other person. And if you can only develop one thing, develop the ability to connect people. What do I need to be looking for to know if someone's a good prospect for you?
That is excellent. If people want to find you online and your book, where's the best place or places to go?
Thank you so much for letting me do that. jeffcwest.com is my website, and you can pretty much find all things about me there. If someone wants to have me come in and work with their team to teach things to them, you can do it there, or you can go to fusionpoints.com. The best way to get the book is streetwise to saleswise.com. But you can get the book in every retail outlet. But if you go there, especially if you want the hardback cover, we've got a special arrangement with Ingram Sparks. You can order directly from them and you get it a lot faster. And then the only other thing, if I may, is tell Saleswise Live is an event that Bob Berg, Kamanjali, and I are holding in West Palm Beach, Florida in June. The return on investment will be huge for people, especially if you do what I did in the insurance industry. Opened up a couple of accounts. I was going to make way more than I would spend on this event. And so I would encourage people to go to saleswiselive.com. That's way too many links. Anyway.
They can rewind. It's all good. We'll put it in the show notes.
I appreciate you, my brother.
Thank you again so much, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Oh, it is my pleasure and my honor. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
And